The Galactic Storm. In the glimmering halls of the Zephyrian Imperial Palace, Lara Nova stood her ground. As Earth's ambassador to the mighty Zephyrian Empire, she had fought tooth and nail for this audience with Emperor Valkor Zane himself. "Your Majesty," Lara began, her voice echoing through the cavernous throne room. "I come bearing grave news. Our deep space probes have detected a massive armada approaching Zephyrian space. They call themselves the Vorath Dominion, and their technology is like nothing we've ever seen." The Emperor lazily waved a six-fingered hand, his scaled skin shimmering in the ethereal light. "The mighty Zephyrian Empire has nothing to fear from some upstart alien rabble," he scoffed. "Especially not on the word of our human allies." Lara bristled at the unspoken disdain in Valkor's tone. For generations, the Zephyrians had treated humanity as little more than a curiosity, a primitive species who had only recently stumbled into the galactic stage. Never mind that human ingenuity and determination had allowed them to claw their way to the stars. To the Zephyrians, they would always be little more than children playing at greatness. "With respect, Your Majesty," Lara pressed on, "this is no mere rabble. The Vorath Dominion has already consumed a dozen star systems. Their ships are faster, their weapons more powerful than anything in the Zephyrian fleet. We must prepare for—" The Emperor cut her off with a bark of laughter. "You humans and your endless paranoia," he chuckled, "always seeing shadows in the stars. The Zephyrian Empire has stood for 1,000 years, and it will stand for 1,000 more. We have no need of human alarmism." Lara opened her mouth to argue, but a sudden commotion at the far end of the throne room interrupted her. A Zephyrian guard burst through the grand doors, his reptilian face twisted in panic. "Your Majesty," the guard gasped, dropping to one knee. "We are under attack. Unknown alien ships have breached our outer defenses and are approaching Zephyria Prime." Emperor Valkor leaped to his feet, his earlier languor forgotten. "What? Impossible." But Lara was already moving, her hand flying to the comm link at her ear. "This is Ambassador Nova to Earth Command," she barked. "Initiate Omega Protocol. I repeat, Omega Protocol is in effect." She turned to face the Emperor, her eyes hard as steel. "Your Majesty, I suggest you rally your forces. The war for Zephyria has begun, and if we don't fight together, we will surely die alone." As alarms began to blare throughout the palace, Lara could only hope that humanity's secret weapon, forged in the hidden depths of space, would be enough to turn the tide. For if the Arcturus fleet failed, not just Zephyria, but the entire galaxy would fall to the Vorath, and the Zephyrians' hubris would be their epitaph. The tide turns. The void of space burned. Zephyrian warships, once the pride of the Empire, tumbled in fiery ruin, their hulls shattered by the relentless onslaught of the Vorath Dominion. The alien armada seemed to fill the stars, an endless swarm of sleek, predatory craft that made the Zephyrian fleet look like children's toys. On the bridge of the ZSS Imperium, flagship of the Zephyrian Space Forces, Emperor Valkor Zane gripped the arms of his command chair until his claws left gouges in the polished metal. "Where are our reinforcements?" he snarled at the terrified communications officer. "Where are the fleets from our colony worlds?" The officer's scales were pale with fear as he responded, "Your Majesty, our colonies, they're not responding. We've lost contact with all of them." Valkor's eyes widened in disbelief. In a matter of hours, the Vorath had crippled the mighty Zephyrian Empire, a civilization that had endured for a millennium. And now, with their fleet in ruins and their colonies silent, it seemed that the Zephyrians would be just another footnote in galactic history, another species ground to dust beneath the Vorath war machine. Aboard the UES Resilience, Lara Nova watched the carnage unfold with a grim expression. The small flotilla of human ships fought valiantly beside their Zephyrian allies, but it was a losing battle. Human weapons, for all their ingenuity, simply couldn't match the sheer power of the Vorath. "Ambassador," the Resilience's captain called over the din of battle, We can't hold them off much longer. We need to evacuate the Zephyrian High Command before. A sudden flash of light silenced him, so bright that Lara had to shield her eyes. When she blinked away the spots, her heart leaped into her throat. Space had changed. Where before there had been only the endless waltz of Vorith and Zephyrian ships, now a new fleet had appeared as if conjured from the very fabric of the universe itself. Sleek, angular ships, their hulls as black as the void and thrumming with an ethereal blue energy. They glided through the battle like ghosts, untouchable and unstoppable. And emblazoned on their flanks, a symbol that sent a thrill of hope through Lara's veins. The stylized A of the Arcturus Initiative. For decades, Arcturus had been humanity's most closely guarded secret, a clandestine research and development program, hidden in the depths of uncharted space, tasked with one purpose: to prepare humanity for the inevitable war that would decide the fate of the galaxy. And now, in humanity's darkest hour, the Arcturus fleet had come. Lara watched in awe as the Arcturus ships tore into the Vorith with a ferocity that defied belief. Beams of scintillating energy sliced through the alien ships like a scalpel through flesh, while swarms of drone fighters danced around them, picking off the survivors with merciless precision. In a matter of minutes, the tide had turned. The Vorith, so assured of their victory, fell back in disarray before the sudden fury of humanity's hidden strength. On the Imperium's bridge, Emperor Valkyr Zane watched the rout of the Vorith with a mixture of relief and consternation. The human ships, these Arcturus interlopers, had snatched victory from the jaws of defeat, and yet Valkyr couldn't shake the feeling that he had just traded one enigma for another. As the last of the Vorith ships fled into the void, Valkyr turned to face the view screen, his eyes locking with Lara Nova's across the gulf of space. "Ambassador," he rumbled, his voice heavy with a mixture of gratitude and suspicion. "It seems that humanity has been keeping secrets from its allies." Lara met the Emperor's gaze unflinchingly. "All will be explained in time, Your Majesty. But for now, know this: Arcturus fights for all of us, for the future of every species in the galaxy." Valkyr leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving Lara's. "I look forward to that explanation, Ambassador. But mark my words, the Zephyrian Empire does not take kindly to deception, even from friends." As the comlink cut off, Lara let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. The battle was won, but the war was just beginning. And the price of victory, she feared, might be the very alliance she had fought so hard to build. Shadows of Arcturus. In the aftermath of the Vorith's devastating assault, an uneasy silence fell across the galaxy. The once unstoppable alien armada had been repelled, sent fleeing back into the depths of uncharted space, but at the cost of revealing humanity's most closely guarded secret. The Arcturus Initiative. On Zephyria Prime, in the war-torn ruins of the Imperial Palace, Lara Nova faced Emperor Valkyr Zane across a table strewn with star maps and battle reports. The Emperor's eyes were hard, his scaled face unreadable. "Explain," he said simply, his voice a low rumble. Lara took a deep breath. "Your Majesty, the Arcturus Initiative was born out of necessity. For decades, humanity had watched the great powers of the galaxy, the Zephyrians, the Vorith, and others, and we knew that eventually war would come, and when it did, we would be hopelessly outmatched." She gestured to the star maps, to the vast swathes of space marked with the stark black of the Vorith Dominion. "We needed an edge, something that could level the playing field against any foe. And so, in secret, we began to build." The scene shifted, the warmly lit council chamber fading away to be replaced by the cold, harsh lines of a hidden space station, deep in the uncharted reaches of the galaxy. The Arcturus Initiative, Lara's voice narrated over the scene, was humanity's Hail Mary. Our best and brightest minds, hidden away from prying eyes, tasked with developing the technologies that would ensure our survival. In flashes and glimpses, the story of Arcturus unfolded. Brilliant scientists hunched over glowing consoles, engineers assembling sleek black ships in zero-gravity dry docks, soldiers training in advanced exosuits that moved with a fluid, almost organic grace. For years we toiled in secret, Lara continued, always watching, always preparing for the day our work would be put to the test. And when the Voreth came, when the galaxy stood on the brink, we were ready. The scene shifted again, back to the present, to Emperor Valkyr's inscrutable gaze. But why the secrecy? The Zephyrian ruler pressed. Why not share this technology with your allies? With us. Lara met his gaze unflinchingly. Because we knew how the galaxy worked, Your Majesty. We had seen the way the great powers jealously guarded their own advances, always seeking an advantage over their rivals. If word of Arcturus had leaked, she shook her head. It would have been an arms race, each species scrambling to develop their own superweapons, or worse, trying to steal ours. It would have destabilized the entire galaxy, maybe even started the very war we were trying to prevent. Valkyr leaned back in his chair, his claws tapping a staccato rhythm on the table. And now that your secret is out. Lara leaned forward, her eyes intent. Now we finish what we started. The Voreth are beaten but not broken. They'll regroup, come back stronger than ever. And when they do, humanity and Arcturus will be there to meet them. She extended a hand across the table, a gesture of peace, of alliance. But we can't do it alone. We need the Zephyrian Empire. We need you, Your Majesty. Together, we have a chance to forge a new future for the galaxy. A future free from the threat of the Voreth, or any other would-be conqueror. For a long moment, Valkyr stared at Lara's outstretched hand. The seconds ticked by, each one an eternity, laden with the weight of the decisions to come. Then, slowly, almost grudgingly, the Emperor reached out and clasped Lara's hand in his own. The Zephyrian Empire will fight, he said, his voice a solemn vow. For the future. As the two leaders shook hands, sealing an alliance forged in the fires of war, Lara allowed herself a small, grim smile. The path ahead would be long and bloody, fraught with danger and sacrifice. But for the first time, she allowed herself to feel a flicker of hope. With Arcturus and the Zephyrians united, they would stand against the coming storm. And the Voreth, and any other threat that dared challenge the ascendant power of humanity, would learn to fear the shadows cast by Earth's hidden strength. The Forge of War. In the weeks following the revelation of Arcturus, a new energy gripped the galaxy. On 1,000 worlds, in 100 systems, the forges of war burned hot, as humanity and Zephyrian alike raced to prepare for the battles to come. On Earth, the great shipyards of the Terran foundries worked around the clock, churning out sleek, deadly vessels emblazoned with the Arcturus sigil. Engineers and scientists, once toiling in secret, now worked hand in hand with their Zephyrian counterparts, exchanging ideas and technologies in a desperate bid to stay ahead of the ever-evolving Voreth threat. In the halls of power, Ambassador Lara Nova found herself at the center of a maelstrom. With the truth of Arcturus now public knowledge, she was besieged on all sides by allies demanding answers, enemies seeking advantage, and a media hungry for any scrap of information about humanity's secret war machine. But through it all, Lara remained steadfast. She met with emperors and counselors, generals and spymasters, weaving a web of alliances and agreements that slowly, painfully, began to unite the fractious powers of the galaxy under a single banner. And all the while, the Voreth loomed on the horizon, a shadow growing ever longer as they licked their wounds and prepared for their next assault. They'll come for Zephyria Prime, Emperor Valkyr Zane said grimly, his eyes fixed on the star maps spread across the war room table. It's the linchpin of our empire. If it falls, the rest will follow. Lara nodded, her own gaze tracing the glowing lines of fleet movements and supply chains. Then that's where we make our stand. We draw the Voreth in, let them commit their forces, and then we hit them with everything we've got. Valkyr's scaled brow furrowed. A risky gambit. If we fail. We won't, Lara said firmly. We can't. There's too much at stake. As the War Council argued and debated, deep in the heart of Arcturus' hidden bases, a new weapon was taking shape. Teams of engineers and artificers labored day and night, assembling a device that could tip the scales of the coming battle, or spell doom for them all. Dr. Ilara Voss, the brilliant xenotech expert who had first conceived of the project, watched as the final components were lowered into place, her face a mask of mingled hope and trepidation. The Nova Bomb, she murmured, almost to herself. A weapon to end all weapons. Lara, standing at her side, cast a sidelong glance at the scientist. And you're sure it will work? Ilara met her gaze, and for a moment, Lara saw the weight of years in those piercing eyes. Years of secret toil, of breakthroughs and setbacks, of the constant, crushing pressure of knowing that the fate of worlds rested on her shoulders. It has to, Ilara said simply. We've staked everything on this. Arcturus, all of it. If the Nova Bomb fails. She trailed off, but Lara could finish the thought herself. If the Nova Bomb failed, it wouldn't just be the end of Arcturus. It would be the end of everything. As the final days ticked down towards the inevitable confrontation, a grim determination settled over the Allied forces. Soldiers drilled tirelessly, pilots ran endless simulations, and in the great shipyards and factories, the tools of war continued to take shape. Lara split her time between the front lines and the halls of diplomacy, rallying troops and swaying politicians with equal fervor. She knew, with a bone-deep certainty, that this would be the defining moment of her life, of all their lives. And when the Vorith finally came, when their black ships darkened the skies over Zephyria Prime, and the battle was finally joined, she would be ready. They all would. For Earth, for Zephyria, for the future. And may the gods have mercy on any who stood in their way. Part 5. For all mankind. The sky burned. On the surface of Zephyria Prime, Lara Nova watched as the Vorith Dominion's warships filled the heavens, a swarm so vast. It seemed to block out the very stars. Beside her, Emperor Valkyr Zane stood in grim silence, his clawed hands clenched at his sides as he surveyed the gathered might of his empire. The gleaming ranks of Zephyrian warriors, the bristling batteries of planetary defenses, all poised and ready for the fight of their lives. And overhead, the sleek, deadly shapes of the Arcturus fleet hung in low orbit, the Nova Bomb nestled in their midst like a dark promise. They're coming, Lara said softly, her eyes never leaving the sky. The Vorith. They're finally making their move. Valkyr nodded, his scaled face set in lines of grim determination. Then let them come. We'll be ready for them. As if on cue, the Vorith ships began to move, descending through the atmosphere in a storm of fire and thunder. The ground shook with the impact of their landing craft, disgorging hordes of chitinous warriors onto the scared surface of the planet. And the battle was joined. Lara found herself at the heart of the chaos, a tide of Zephyrian and human soldiers surging around her as they met the Vorith advance. Laser fire criss-crossed the battlefield, the air thick with the stench of ozone and burnt chitin. Through it all, Lara fought with a savage grace, her plasma rifle spitting death into the Vorith ranks. Beside her, Emperor Valkyr was a whirlwind of claws and fury, his ancient ceremonial blade carving a path through the enemy. But for every Vorith that fell, two more seemed to take its place. They swarmed over the defenses, shrugging off the punishing fire of the planetary batteries, driving the defenders back step by bloody step. In orbit, the situation was no less dire. The Arcturus fleet engaged the Vorith in a dizzying ballet of destruction, the Nova Bomb at the center of a maelstrom of fire and debris. But the Vorith kept coming, heedless of their losses, driven by a single-minded hunger for conquest. We're losing ground. Valkyr snarled over the comms, his voice ragged with exertion. We can't hold them. Lara gritted her teeth, her mind racing. They had planned for this, wargamed every scenario. But the reality was proving far harder than they'd ever imagined. "We have to hold," she said, pouring all her conviction into the words. "Just a little longer. Until the Nova bomb is in position." And so they fought on, each minute an eternity, each inch of ground paid for in blood. The Vorath pressed in from all sides, a chitinous tide that seemed unstoppable, until, at last, the skies above Zephyria Prime lit up with a searing, blinding light. The Nova bomb had detonated. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then the shockwave hit, a wall of force that flattened everything in its path. Vorath and Defender alike were tossed aside like leaves in a hurricane, the very ground buckling and cracking under the onslaught. And in the skies above, the Vorath fleet shattered. Their ships came apart like rotten wood, their hulls peeling away, their innards spilling into the void. It was a cataclysm on a scale unseen in the history of galactic warfare, the might of the Vorath Dominion, undone in a single searing instant. In the stunned silence that followed, Lara and Valkyr clambered to their feet, their armor scorched and dented, their faces streaked with sweat and grime. Around them, the remnants of their forces staggered from the rubble, blinking in the sudden, eerie quiet. The Vorath were gone, broken, defeated, against all odds, against the might of an empire that had swallowed worlds. They had won. But the cost had been staggering. In the days that followed, as the smoke cleared and the dead were counted, the true toll of the battle became clear. Entire cities lay in ruins, the once verdant fields of Zephyria Prime scorched and barren. And of the brave souls who had stood against the Vorath onslaught, far too many would never return home. Yet even in the midst of the devastation, there was cause for hope. Across the galaxy, news of the victory spread like wildfire. The invincible Vorath, laid low by the combined might of humanity and Zephyrian. In the halls of power, treaties were signed and alliances forged, the old rivalries and suspicions swept away in the face of this new shared purpose. And on 100 worlds, in 1,000 tongues, a single phrase was whispered with a mix of awe and reverence. For all mankind, for all Zephyria, for the future. In the heart of the Arcturus Initiative, in a chamber deep beneath the surface of a nameless moon, Lara Nova and Emperor Valkyr Zane stood side by side, their eyes fixed on the holographic display before them. It showed a galaxy in flux, old empires fading and new alliances rising. And at the center of it all, a symbol that had once been humanity's most closely guarded secret, now a beacon of hope for all the cosmos. The shining A of Arcturus. "We did it," Lara murmured, her voice raw with exhaustion and emotion. "We won." Valkyr nodded, his scaled face split in a rare smile. "Indeed we did, Ambassador. Indeed we did." He turned to face her, his eyes reflecting the light of the hologram. "But the fight isn't over. The Vorath were just the beginning. There will be others out there, other threats waiting in the dark between the stars." Lara met his gaze, her own eyes hardening with resolve. "And we'll be ready for them. Humanity, Zephyrian, Arcturus, all of us, together." She reached out, clasping Valkyr's clawed hand in her own. For the future, and as the galaxy turned, as the wheels of history spun on into an uncertain dawn, one thing was clear. Whatever trials lay ahead, whatever enemies might rise from the cosmic depths, they would face them as one. For Arcturus, for all of them,